We got scolded at our own hangout.
Yeah, really. 5, 4, 3. Are you starting?
He's in charge. Yeah, he's in charge.
All right, welcome everybody. Hey, thanks everyone. It's a real honor to be here tonight with so many people in the class, and this is the first group of people that started filling the classroom from the front. Usually it's people way in the back.
Yeah.
So,
especially when the food's back there.
That's right.
The food is behind them.
Yeah.
So it's been a real blast for us to work together. I want to quickly go around. My name is Peter Lubbers. I know quite a few of you from the San Francisco HTML5 user group. I'm a program manager at Google in the Chrome Developer Relations team. Can everyone hear me in the back?
If you can't hear
a little bit
him,
more. Okay.
If you can't hear him, just yell P-Lubs. Okay?
Yes, that's right.
He loves faux life.
So, been working on this course with Colt and Sean for the last about 6 or 7 months, and it's been a real blast. One of the most fun things I've ever done. Before I joined Google, I did a lot of HTML5 training, and taking it to this whole new scale with Udacity has been a real blast, right? So I want to quickly go around, and then we'll go over some of the logistics and what we're going to be talking about.
Yeah, my name is Colt McCandless. Hello, everyone.
Louder.
Yeah.
Oh, all right, fantastic. Crowd participation, I enjoy it.
Yes.
My name is Colt McCandless. I am actually a developer advocate at Google, focusing on the Chrome team, mostly performance and game development. I'm actually an ex-game developer. Spent about 10 years in the industries working on franchise titles like Halo, Diablo 3, Blizzard, World of Warcraft, StarCraft 2, stuff like that. Blizzard's a company, not a game.
Yeah, I was confused.
There's people.
It's
weird.
distracted. Okay.
Yes, I also spent about 4 years as an adjunct professor at SMU Guildhall School for Video Game Development. So it was kind of really nice to be able to approach Udacity and see sort of how we're changing the future of education, especially in America. It's really nice to actually look at something that's been so set in stone for so long and really disrupt the education and see how fast we could train people to become amazing game developers. So.
Yeah. And I'm Sean Bennett. I'm a course architect.
Louder.
I'm sorry. Can everyone hear me?
Yes. Who wants
kind
to?
Of. Who doesn't want to hear me? Okay, I'm seeing people laughing. I'm assuming they can listen. Okay. So my name is Sean Bennett. I am a course architect at Udacity. I've been working there for about 10 months or so now. I started working there on the web development course with Steve Huffman. Ever since then, just had a blast working with Udacity. I see a lot of people in the audience that I see from other meetups. So we've got a lot of stuff going on here in the Bay Area and elsewhere, which it's always a lot of fun to interact with you guys and just have a great time. So thank you for coming here.
Okay. So we also have a live stream going on. So everyone on the live stream,
hello.
Thanks for tuning in. The last I checked, we had about 260 people watching live, which is great. A couple of quick logistical items about this study group. So. First thing is, it's an 8-week study group, and of course we wanted to have them on 8 consecutive Mondays, but with President's Day we had to move this event to Wednesday. From now on, it will be on Wednesday. It will be
Monday.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Great. So it will be on Monday nights, and it will be in a different.
Still third.
It will be in a different room. It'll be on I think the 10th floor, but I'll give the information out. But just next time you come in, it'll be on a Monday and on a different floor. But from then on, it will always be in that room. So we wanted to have this. So as you know, we release the units for this course like 1 a week. So this sort of coincides with how the future units will be rolled out. So. We have, how many units do we have up there now?
We have 3 units up there right now.
3 units up there now. Mm-hmm. We'll start tonight with the discussion on the first 2 units, and then we'll track each unit as it comes out. So basically you have a week to go through the unit, come up with questions. We will open a moderator that we have up here right now to ask questions. So of course, if you're here, you can ask them live. But if you're not, if you're on the live stream, we will open up this live stream information. So we're going to be sending all of the updates and so on to the Udacity study group page. So there's the the CS255 page that you're already signed up on. You will get some emails through that, but also there's a study group page that has all the links to it. So the links from tonight we're going to be posting there. So that's a little bit about the logistics. Any questions about the logistics? And if you have any questions, jump right in. We have a mic up here, but if you're unable to get out, just shout it out. So
yeah, just be loud.
Before we before we move on, okay, good. All right, so tonight we really wanted to go over units 0 and 1. But first of all, wanted to give a quick thank you to everyone that has been suffering through some of the issues we've had with some of the grading scripts. You're all aware of it. We really appreciate your kindness of sort of working through some of these issues without blasting us completely. So, Sean, can you give an update on
Yeah,
the grading
so
scripts?
we started out doing Jasmine Tests. For those of you who are familiar with some of the different JavaScript test frameworks, we started with Jasmine, and it just really wasn't working out. We also had a system in place where the test would automatically get injected into the page with the student code, and again, depending on when things loaded, that got ugly fast. If any of you have ever dealt with JavaScript loading issues, you'll understand what I'm talking about. So we've moved over to a few different frameworks. The ones that we're using are a combination of Mocha, Chai, and Sign-On. Yeah, so all doing different things. So because they're all good at different things. We've got most of the fixes on in the pipeline. Hopefully those will be done by the end of the week. I will send an email out as soon as those fixes are good to go, and then we'll have a new unit ready to go on Monday. And I'd also like to thank all the students that have been helping out with that, especially the ones that have been active in the forums. It's been amazing how much they have helped out and mentioned, oh, to work around this problem, you do this. So it's been very, very helpful to do that.
I gotta say, it really makes it easy to be an incompetent teacher when you have students that are as good as they are, answering the questions in the forums, getting the problems. It makes it easier for me to be lazy.
Yeah.
Really.
Yeah. But yeah. So those should be in the pipeline. Then they should be done by the end of the week. And if they're not, you should email me and yell at me.
Should you put your email in?
Yeah, right there. Yeah. Well, I'm sure you've gotten an email from me. You should have it.
So for tonight, we really wanted to combine an aspect that is not commonly part of a MOOC, the massive online open courses.
Please don't use that term. I hate that word so much.
With the online courses, it's typically like the benefits, of course, are great, but one of the downsides is you don't really have to talk to someone. It's different from being in an actual classroom. So we thought, well, let's experiment with this, where we're very lucky that Google said, okay, you can have this venue and all the catering and so on, all provided by Google.
Yeah, real quick, if you love the catering, let's hear a round of
Yeah,
applause.
seriously. She's right back there somewhere. So.
It was amazing. It was like amazing
Yeah,
in my
it
mouth.
was a
Cuban-
party. Yeah,
Yeah,
it was a Cuban party.
Cuban party
Yeah.
in your mouth.
Yeah, it was fantastic.
Yeah, that was
Anyway.
really great. So, but we wanted to combine that aspect to see, like if there's questions. I mean, it's kind of hard sometimes if the online training is just sort of this one-way street sometimes. So we wanted to make it more interactive, and that's why we're having, this study group. So wanted to also start then with asking, what kind of questions you have. We have a moderator. You don't have to put them in there because we'll get to these questions. But really wanted to get to your questions first because you made the effort to come all the way out here. So maybe we can start with a few questions. If you're anywhere near the mic, that would be very helpful.
Yeah.
We will repeat the questions otherwise. But
Yeah, if you can't get to the mic, just feel free to speak up. Any questions you have. I don't think they even have to necessarily be about Unit 0 and 1.
Nope, it can be about anything course-related.
If you just want crazy stories.
Crazy game dev stories.
Those are always a good time. I'd highly recommend.
We had to blooper reel a lot of the crazy stories. But
Oh, man.
There's more.
Oh.
Tony, you have a question? Oh, go first.
First taker.
Yep, first taker. Yep.
It sounded like you had a question.
Oh.
Sorry.
So, what is your recommended process of debugging? Is this mic on?
Yeah, it's on. It's just not projecting.
Oh,
Yeah,
sorry.
It's projecting into there.
Okay. Yeah, what is your recommended process of debugging? So the error messages don't always reflect exactly what's going on, and if you look at the standard JavaScript debugging tools, sometimes there's so much going on in terms of the, all the different things interacting. It's hard to actually see your code.
Right.
So.
Absolutely.
Go ahead and repeat the question.
Yeah. So the question is, what are our recommendations for debugging? And there are actually debugging quizzes. And actually, there are two different questions there actually that I think would be good is debugging the quizzes and debugging JavaScript, which I will let someone else answer the second one. Debugging the quizzes, I would say that you should email me or ask questions in the forums if you're getting, for example, the special little snowflake error message, which you can thank one of our engineers for coming up with that phrase. But yeah, the first 2 units, some of the quizzes are just a little bit hairy. I would say most of those should be fixed again by the end of the week. And if they are not, you should yell at me. Debugging JavaScript in general is also somewhat painful, as we've found out.
Can be, but one of the tools that I prefer to use, not biased here, Chrome Developer Tools. Have you used the Chrome Developer Tools to get an insight? So, like Sean said, we have the 2 different parts of the story. So there's the online experience of the quizzes, which, of course, now you have the page and your JavaScript. But let's say you're actually building your own game. There's actually a lot of great stuff in the Chrome Developer Tools. Have you used those?
I did try, but
okay.
There's so much in terms of the framework and everything.
Yeah.
It's a large tool.
Right.
So to very be clear, debugging the scripts that are coming through the Udacity page for the quizzes should be very straightforward. And if there's problems there, and if there's any errors in there, contact Sean and yell at him angrily until it gets fixed.
Absolutely.
So that being done, you shouldn't really need to open the Chrome Developer Tools to do these scripts. It should all be automated off the site.
Yeah.
So then the second question is, how do you debug JavaScript in general?
Right.
And as Peter's saying, that if you haven't used Chrome Developer Tools, go absorb as much information as you can on it. It's a fantastic resource. You get timelines, you get breakpoints, you get everything else you need in that process.
One of the things I would like to quickly plug as almost a commercial, but really great stuff. So the live stream that we're looking at tonight, or you're not looking at, but is actually sponsored by Google Developers Live. They created this entire mobile Google Developers Live kit that we have out there streaming.
With a lot of wires.
There's a lot of wires. We just got it today, so bear with us.
Yeah.
They have a lot of great shows. One of them is called The Breakpoint, with after the breakpoints you set in your code. It's something I really highly recommend because Paul Irish and Adi Osmani come on this show. There's already about 5 episodes. They come out about every 2 weeks or so, and they give you some really great insights into specific areas of debugging. So it's a little bit too much perhaps to go into here. If you have any specific questions after, we can take a look at that. But definitely check out, there's a lot of stuff you can learn just in the developer tools in that space. So I would highly recommend that. There's other tools too, like Firefox has the Firebug tool, and they're working on some new developer tools as well. So all of these tools have their own sort of insights and are great, and they're all pretty much do the same thing.
I got a question for Code.
Uh-oh.
I saw yesterday on Hacker News, it was trending on the top. Diablo, somebody wrote in JavaScript, was pretty awesome. And I'm just trying to get an idea, what level of game are we going to be able to develop at the end of the course? Because I've seen some really awesome examples out there. So just wanted to get a idea, is it going to be professional? Where does the course leave us?
Got it.
What next?
I think that's a great question. So for those of you who didn't hear, the question was, what kind of game, in terms of architecture, in terms of quality at level, what type of game are we going to have at the end of the course? So as most of you know, the course is actually based off the GRITS development game that we made for Google I/O 2012 last year, which is actually a player versus player top-down shooter. So if you've ever played Super Smash TV or Gun Brothers, things along those lines, basically you're taking a top-down perspective and you're running your little robots around shooting missiles at other players. Now we've actually broken the course, the entire content of the course, into two classes actually, client-side and server-side. Now CS255 is actually all the client-side data. So when you're done with this course, you'll have every piece you need to know to create a two-dimensional, top-down, physics-based, input-driven, robot-killing massacre machine. It's going to be amazing.
Yeah. Except for other players.
Except for other players.
Yes.
That's recorded.
Yeah, it's recorded. So, and then what we're going to do is, of course, a lot of people are looking at this course and making sure that it's getting the traction it needs to. Once we really feel that we're getting the student input and we need everything we can, then we'll start working on the next course. And the next course will tie everything together with putting together things like using Google App Engine for matchmaking, login, player identity, purchasing goods, issuing credits, as well as maybe, if you're all lucky and eat your dinner, how to use Google Compute Engine to host virtual games. So this is all coming in the future, and that'll tie everything together we did for Grits moving there.
I thought the matchmaking service was on Compute Engine.
Matchmaking is actually done all on Google App Engine, actually.
Okay.
Yeah,
I thought it was the other way around.
No, we
Okay.
actually run a persistent backend that'll do all the matchmaking stuff behind the scenes. Yeah. It's actually a very complex.
Yeah.
What are your recommendations for storyboarding and putting those process flows in place before you even get started with the game?
With the game?
With the game? Or with the
Yeah, well, in its entirety, when you're actually building out the game or creating a plan,
Okay.
what's the
So the game, not a
process?
game, not course. Got it.
I was trying to dodge that question. So for those of you who didn't hear, what is the recommendation for doing storyboarding and data gathering, and how do you plot out the course of actually building a game? Because it's a pretty monumental task, and it's really, really mind-numbing. So I will say this, is I've been through this process a handful of times, and this is my personal opinion about the proper way to go. Every game studio you go to and every game developer you meet is going to have their own secret sauce on the way they think things should actually work. And of course, if you talk to a mobile developer versus a console developer, they'll generally butt heads about the way things need to work as well, because you have to worry about economic concerns and size of teams, and how long you're going to end up in the top 10 on whatever marketplace versus how much the publisher's taking away for shipping your console game because it has to sit on a shelf at Walmart for 6 months. Anyhow, when it all gets down to the development, the idea always starts with a designer, right? So in game development, we usually have a 3 or 4 slot setup. You've got programmer, artist, designer, and then producer / management / everybody else who's not actually putting bits in the box, right? Usually the way things will work is a designer will sit down and say, I've got this great idea based upon some other game. I will have to say that the most successful products we've ever seen in the games industry have either been edge of genre for new devices, right? Angry Birds was actually not necessarily new in terms of concept, but it was edge of genre for a brand new device. It was the first time that we were actually able to interact in an entertaining way with this new piece of hardware. As opposed to like Halo, right? Halo again was not new. It was actually kind of a remake of what you saw with 007 GoldenEye on the Nintendo 64, but again, edge of genre. So typically what game designers will do, they'll find these existing games and build upon them. They'll say these things are good, these things are bad, and they'll move forward. Now, in that concept, after they've developed their idea, they'll typically move into a phase where they actually start generating the story. Right? And this actually follows very much, game developers are actually trying to mimic more of what movie producers and book producers do. Right? So they'll attend classes on how to make movies and how to write books and how to put together good storyboards, because they realize that those guys actually have probably the best processes in place. Now, here's where things diverge a little bit. Most game studios who have found success actually realize that the only way to achieve it is through massive amounts of horrible, teeth-grinding iteration. Right? Which means while the designer is sitting here trying to create this baby of imagination, the producer's cracking whips saying we have to ship stuff on a certain date. And then the programmers get involved, and then the artists get involved. And so basically, everyone's kind of tumbling over themselves, iterating on these concepts. Because the designer may come up with a great storyline, but may not manifest itself as something that's actually fun to play. But you don't know that until the artists have put in all the content and the programmers have put in all the gameplay mechanics. right? So then you spend all these hours putting stuff together and then die off. Did I lose it?
Oh,
Are you still there?
you're not still there.
I'm not still there.
Yeah.
Okay.
I can get,
I will
Okay.
press that on the other machine.
Press the
yeah,
button.
here.
Yeah.
Hold on.
Okay. No. I got
Nope.
it.
Is
Yeah.
that-
She'll do it. She'll
Yeah.
Should do, yes.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Okay. Yes.
We have a follow-up question in the middle of the crowd here.
Press the yes button.
Yeah.
Put them into a scrum and just do like a 2-week sprint. So
Oh, okay.
like, what is the game mechanic? Here's the user story. Does it work? Is it fun?
Oh,
Instead
sprints.
of wasting your time, I'm sorry, not wasting your time. But instead of following along with the old tired and true waterfall production method.
So the question was, where do standard software development processes fit in the world of game development? To surmise, is that a pretty okay way to? So I will say they don't. So waterfall methodology, Scrum methodology, agile development, pair programming, game developers don't care, to be honest with you. And most of us are not educated in these terminologies. Most of this is actually implanted on us by managers who just got hired at the company who spent the last 6 weeks on Black Belt Six Sigma, right? And they're like, you guys have to follow this pattern. In reality, game developers were artists, right? We spent a lot of time immersing ourselves on what's the best DPS for our cleric double build with a druid. Right? And those are programmers, right? We could care less about your waterfall methodology and how this gets done. Now, I will say that successful studios that follow these mentalities have the right people in place to make it successful. But most game developers are young, they're not very good developers, and they don't have a lot of experience on iterative failure, if that makes sense, right? Like, think about the games industry as a whole. It's actually not driven by people who've been in it for 60 years. It's mostly driven by 20-somethings who don't have a wife, don't have a kid, and can spend 22 hours a day at the office eating Pop-Tarts, crunching on a game that will never see the light of day. And loving it. Because the other 2 hours, they're balancing their DPS on their cleric dual road so they can actually get into the freaking guild that does the raid on Nagafin every Monday.
Yeah.
Nagafin, anybody? Nagafin? No one is an EverQuest crackhead in here.
Oh,
fantastic.
man.
That's
Yeah.
dating myself there.
How do you feel about that?
I love it.
Okay.
Love it. Love EverQuest. So to kind of wrap it up, because I know we have more people question, I can rant about game development and the processes all day. The main thing is this, is that the game development industry itself is extremely young. Now, we've been making video games since the late 80s, but we're still very young. And the reason is that we're a young industry. It's a wild, wild west industry, especially in 2009 when we saw the advent of social gaming, casual gaming, as well as mobile gaming all come on the scene at once. Once you heard that first chime in the wind that Farmville was making billions of dollars, and you looked at that game and said, this? This is making money? Imagine, 200, 300,000 other developers that said the same exact thing. Overnight, everyone became a game developer. Overnight, everyone wanted to do gamification, right? Little did they know, there was a lot of us who were sitting around who were like, hey, you kids, get off my lawn, right? So the truth of the matter is, fly by the seat of your pants, iterate, find something fun. It's really, follow fake Grimlock. Lean entrepreneurship is, if you want to find something that matches what game development does, look at how lean entrepreneurs run their companies. Right? You iterate, you find the failure points fastest. The game that ships is not the best one, it's the one that you had when time ran out. And that's been it since the beginning of time, unless you're id or Blizzard and then you iterate on a game for 12 years, but that's a separate discussion. Yeah. Sorry. If that answered your question.
Yeah.
So.
I was wondering, what is the state of the art in terms of, like, the whole point of this course, well, not the whole point, a large part of this course is basically drawing things to canvas, but there doesn't seem to be any actual way to assert that anything actually was done on canvas, I can't, unit test that I actually did draw that on canvas, or I have layered them in this order. How do I do that with canvas, basically?
Basically, you need to create a log wrapper, right? Yeah. So the question is, how do you query the canvas for what you've done to it? Essentially, if I get the gist of it.
Yeah.
And basically, you have to create a wrapper around the canvas that you log all the information to, as far as I can tell.
So basically, you can call get user media on the canvas object, and that'll return a byte array of pixels. And then you can either log that in memory, send it over to a native client module, write it to the file system or whatever. You could probably do that on each RAF callback, request animation. I know we haven't gone into request animation frames yet, but you can probably capture each frame of your simulation using the get user media. and then write it to disk. If you want to automate this in a headless fashion, which I think is a little bit more to the core of your point, then we have to take a step back and look at web development as an ecosystem. And I can rant about that for hours, about the vision of what the web is and how developers should approach the web and how that's different from game development. In game development, you just got a raw pixel buffer and anything you need, and you can kind of unit test to your heart's consent. But unfortunately, in the web, you've got sandbox after sandbox after sandbox you have to jump through to get access to the most trivial thing.
And I know nothing about game development in actuality, but
me either.
No, but
He's lying.
is this the way? I mean, you guys, real games are developed on immediate mode renders, just like Canvas, I suppose. And so you guys can't really have been, taking screenshots every frame and asserting things. Were you doing something else? How do you test in games in general?
Oh, great question.
That was.
So, follow-up question: how do you test in games in general, specifically with graphics and whatnot? It's very teeth-numbing. Usually, you have one guy sitting in the corner. He's usually bald, probably has facial hair, and usually what that guy's job is the entire graphics engine. And what he'll do is he'll have a guy sit next to him who's in charge with the art pipeline. And basically what these guys do is every day they boot up the game and they run through the levels and they make sure things look right.
Okay.
And I know this is teeth-numbing, but you got to remember everything's so iterative that the time to create the test is often blown away by all the resources to create the environment, or
that's interesting.
I recently saw something that Paul Irish was demoing. I think it's in Canary, where you can actually go in the Chrome Developer Tools once again. You can replay anything on a canvas, like literally frame by frame by frame. I'm not exactly sure.
Is this continuous mode or Skia?
I think there's already a WebGL inspector that will do stuff like this, but it's not built in.
But it won't do Canvas.
Yeah, it won't do 2D Canvas.
This was on a canvas animation that I was doing. But
Now, I will also say this as a follow-up, is that there are great tools out there depending on your platform. So if you're actually programming on Windows, there's a fantastic tool called Pix. I think it's actually been replaced in Visual Studio 2010 with Windows Graphics Inspector, Wiggy, or something like that.
Not nearly as cool a name.
Yeah, I know. Pix was so much cooler. But effectively, that'll allow you to do frame-by-frame breakdown and actually do frame captures. Now, if you're not actually programming direct 3D, and you're actually using OpenGL, NVIDIA, AMD, ATI, those guys all have proprietary tools that they ship out to developers that allow you to do graphical analysis and debugging. In fact, NVIDIA is probably one of my favorites. It's called NV is NVIDIA, PerfHUD. And that's fantastic. It requires you to take a couple modifications to your code to be able to get the visualizations. But the really cool thing is, because they wrote the system and own the hardware, is you can do stuff like show me a heat map of how many pixels have been overdrawn. Right? Overdraw being a very important metric for video game development, because that's how many times you've redrawn a pixel that actually doesn't contribute to the scene. So you've spent all those processor cycles actually coloring this pixel only to draw an ogre on top of it, and then draw a wall in front of him, and then draw a portal in front of that. So you don't see any of that data, but you've processed all of it, right? And then you get into occlusion culling, and I can dive deep on that too. But if you're doing standard development, check out Pix, NV, PerfHUD. Unfortunately, we don't have really good versions for the web that rival those tools, but I hope one day we do.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Quick question, quick answer probably. I just want to know what's the best way to get the most out of this course? Like, is there anything I should think about, or I should kind of...
I would say
is actually...
Repeat the question.
Yeah.
The question was, what's the best way to get the most out of this course? One thing I would I was just thinking to hold the question until I was going to say something about it. We're running a contest. How many of you are aware of this contest? Okay.
So a fair amount.
At least about half of you. But check out on the Udacity site. There's a blog, right? The blog, what is it?
Blog.udacity.com, and it'll link to the wiki.
There's a blog post that has all the details about the contest. So we're running in parallel with this study group, effectively, a contest of building your own game. So I think one way to get a lot out of it is to really try things, right? Like not just the things that the challenges we're giving you, but actually try out your own game, and it can be completely different. With this contest, there's some really cool prizes. Actually, two really cool ones. The main prizes are, first one is a ticket to Google I/O. If you've tried to get a ticket, then you know how hard it is. And the other one is a cameo appearance in one of the future Udacity movies with all expenses paid, which in this case it's a trip to Mountain View.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I hope you like Mountain View.
But for those on the live stream, this
Yeah.
you could be in many places. Of course, unfortunately, there are a couple of legal little rules, and there are a couple of excluded countries. Unfortunately, that's really not our. We wanted to open it up for everyone, but
it's pretty much open for the most part.
Yeah,
yeah.
I mean, there's a couple of little.
We fought honestly to open up as much as possible.
Yeah, great job.
It wouldn't be MOOC otherwise, would it?
Yeah, exactly.
So I'd also like to point this out. As a game developer who kind of taught himself how to program video games, like this education didn't exist when I was starting, right? Like to understand how to build a quad tree and binary space partitions, the way I taught myself is actually looking at the Quake source code. I actually taught myself 3D mathematics analyzing the Quake source code. It was the first time I'd ever seen a Z variable. I was like, what is this? What are we doing with this Z thing? Yeah. And unfortunately, their coordinate system was weird, so Z was up, and I was like, what?
Yeah.
Anyhow, separate age dating thing. So what I suggest you do is this. Watch the course, go through the quizzes, and then go find an HTML5 game and figure out where they're doing that same thing. Right? We're going to start talking about rendering maps. We're going to start talking about input, collision handling. We're going to talk about sound. If you can take what you're learning in our class and find in someone else's code base how they're doing it, then you're going to learn a lot more that way, right? So if you just contain yourself to our stuff, fantastic. I really want to see you guys use this as a springboard. Go check out impact.js. Go check out cocoon.js. Go check out playbiolab.com. Right? Go look at these different JavaScript games, and just look for JavaScript HTML5 game. Right? Look at their source code. See if you can find the same patterns in there. And again, if you see something there that doesn't match with what we're talking about, ask us. We'd love to figure out what's going on too.
We might be doing it wrong.
We very well be. Very well. That's really what I recommend is find the patterns we're teaching you in other people's source code, and then see how they're using it and why they're using it. You're going to find out a lot more data that way.
I'd also say find inspiration there for whatever you want to build for yourself. And then come ask us those questions. Like if you've got an idea for a game and you can't figure out, oh, I've got this problem with it that you want to submit for the contest. This is a great place to ask questions about it and try and figure it out. That's the point.
And one other thing is you can team up with other people to do this game, right? So,
except us.
Can't do that. You don't want to work with them.
That's true. Kind of bold.
I don't think this works. So.
No, it's working for the internal audio.
Oh, I got
Sorry.
you. So there's really two follow-ups here on that. The question about, what are you going to get out of this course? I have scars all over my face from doing graphics the hard way back in this, and you talk about dating yourself. You're not going to compete with me. Okay. So, but really, what I don't really want to build a game. So don't kick me out of here. I want to use these techniques to say I did all those things the hard way in the past, and now I want to know the prescribed way that works efficiently inside of today's browsers. Okay? And I want to use some of these techniques like having balls go around a screen that might be pieces of data that you've recently accessed and clicking on them and getting input and drilling down into that. So Peter has seen my 3D video, and what I want to also know from Udacity is what is the philosophy about Udacity about creating derivative courses? Because I already have some ideas about courses that could be derived from the base material that you learn in this one. All right, so learning, I think, is a lifelong activity, and what you're doing is getting me back into some things that I put away because they were, kind of too easy. I did them the hard way, and then I lost interest in doing them the easy way. But it's all relevant again. So I want to know, I guess the question here is, what's your philosophy about proposing and potentially doing derivative courses?
Okay. So the question is, for those of you who couldn't hear, what is Udacity's philosophy for proposing and doing derivative courses? Which is a pretty big question. I don't want to speak for the entire company of Udacity for fear of being on live stream. Talk to me later. No, I think I can safely say that Udacity is all about education, and the more people we can educate and the better we can educate them, the better. If you have an idea for a course, or if you have something that you'd like to do, talk to us. I mean, we would very much love to hear it. We want to do as much as possible to drive people's education, especially in these kind of cutting edge areas where, you know, we're cutting ourselves as much as anything else.
So without allowing you to get into any trouble
Yes.
on there, what I got from last Thursday's thing and from today is you guys are very enthusiastic and open about this. And I just want to say that it comes through.
Thank
All right,
you.
so I had the suspicion that you guys would be receptive, okay, to ideas about how to improve the process, and that you're not going to be like, well, we know it all, and all you guys are at a different level, okay?
Okay,
Because that does happen in business, you know.
But let me just stop you right there. So he just said he was afraid that we might say that, you know, we know it all.
Yes.
No. We do not even remotely know it all. We are still figuring out this whole online education, MOOCs, if you want to call them that, thing. And we're kind of flying by the seat of our pants. And we really like it that way. So we love figuring out new ways and better ways to teach people.
I know there's other people in the room that'll do it too, but I'm going to pester you guys to go further and push it, okay? You know,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah,
That's right.
absolutely.
And I will tell you that my wife reminds me every day that I'm wrong. So obviously,
Yes.
I don't know everything. I love you, honey.
Should we take
Okay.
a couple questions from the
Yeah, let's
audience?
start taking.
Go ahead.
So the first question is, will we be building up our own game as we follow along with the course? So I think the simple answer for that is yes, actually in two ways. One is perhaps you're going to be part of the contest. That's cool.
Yeah.
Obviously all the source code for grids is already out there, right? You can take that today and play around with it. Actually, one quick note is we're working on one issue where the grids game currently is not starting up, right?
the server. Yeah.
That-
Is the compute engine thing
Yeah,
happening
we're-
again?
yeah.
Okay, yeah.
We're switching some
We'll fix
stuff
it.
in the
We'll,
back.
we're moving it around.
Yeah.
But you can download the whole thing and look at the entire source. So you don't even have to wait week by week. You can have all of that, and you can build your own game. So yes, basically that
in
answers
multiple
that.
ways.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, and so I'll say this just as a follow-up on that is the term game is, I think, ambiguous, and a lot of people use it in different ways to mean different things. By the end of this first course, you're going to have every piece of a toolkit, of a toolbox that you would ever need to make the type of game we're presenting, right? But we're not going to teach you, like this, we're not teaching you how an isometric engine works to make a Diablo 3 clone. We're also not teaching you how to do proper server-side interaction for an MMO. Right, but we are teaching you the basics on how to get stuff moving. If you use the word game as all these higher order primitives, like, you know, I want to make sure that I create the halberd of amazing, right? And every time it hits a bald guy, it gives them hair. We're not going to cover that because that's very the bald guys. We thumbs up. I want that thing to smack me in the face. So we're not going to work on that. But by the end of this course, you'll have a firm understanding of how grits works, how the type of game works, and then be able to translate that to what you're doing next.
Perfect. Okay. And just a quick note on that previous question. One more thing. So this is the client-side version of grids.
Client.
Quite important because we're actively discussing doing the server side as a follow-up second course. Of course, it's going to depend on how successful this is.
Tell your friends to take the course.
Exactly.
If you want server-side stuff, tell your friends to take the course.
WebSockets for the win.
WebSockets, yeah.
So next question, how important is it that we learn Resig's method to create classes over the various other ways to use inheritance in JavaScript, set prototype property in Code Academy's guide, object create in MDN's guide, class prototype, general thoughts?
Let me hit this number one. It does not matter. You need object inheritance. You need to be able to define a class prototype and inherit from that class, override from that class. If you have a preferred method that floats your boat more than the method we got, fantastic. We chose Resig's method because it works, it's efficient. Resig's a great guy. That's the one we chose, the one we use with. And also, it's the same one that's used in the impact.js engine. So if you actually go take a look at the impact.js source code or the Ejecta framework, you'll see very similar trends there. It's just the one we found, the one we thought that was nice and kind of worked with there.
This next question is kind of a big one.
Yeah.
The question is, any tips for keeping the project structure beautiful and well organized when it starts becoming really huge? This is a fool's errand.
Play for it. Okay, so I'll jump in again here because I'm loud and I don't stop talking.
Yeah.
So I've worked on a couple million-plus line code bases before in a couple different setups, and every company has their own vibe on how to handle these things. One company's million-plus line code base, they were like, it's all C++ code, everything has to be in DLLs, right? Because if you change the AI code, I don't want to have to recompile my graphics engine, and he shouldn't have to recompile all of his spatial sorting data, right? Another company was like, screw all of you because DLL hell is stupid, so all of the code is in one thing, and we just use Incredibuild, and Incredibuild does all that. The best thing we can really come down to is unit test your code. Testing rocks, debugging sucks, right? And we've seen this everywhere. Game developers aren't good at doing this. We need to get better because we spend a lot of time not doing the right thing. Other stuff is make sure you get a buddy to look at your code. And I know that's not a structure of like management, but having some dude who's not bald take a look at your code will reveal a lot of problems. Go out.
That last point's important.
It really is.
Yeah.
I'm a bald guy. It happens a lot. Really, go out and look at a lot of other companies and how they do it. Go read Google's architecture manifestos and all the books that are published out there about how Google manages its infrastructure and the videos and stuff like that. Go read all of Valve's papers. Who plays Valve games? Awesome.
Okay.
They have a great website that they list all of their demos and all of their publications. Crytek, another great company that lists tons of information. Insomniac, another great company that lists all their data. Go look at their stuff, figure out how they do it. Every company is different. Every methodology is different. Once you get above 1 million lines of code, it's just a bunch of people throwing rocks at a dinosaur. So.
That was a beautiful metaphor.
It really is. And the great thing is, once you get above 1 million lines, I dare you to be the enterprising soul that figures out how many megabytes of strings you have in that 1 million lines of code. and then figure out how many of those megabytes shipped.
Yeah.
So next question is, although there's so much resource available now, I sometimes feel lost. Is there any roadmap for a web developer, game developer? What core skills should I focus on and learn? This actually came up last Thursday when we had the Google Developers Live session with Sebastian. Similar question was asked then. And I think that's definitely a problem. I mean, there's a lot of stuff available, but trying to make sense and going to the right places is important. So, for example, one of the efforts we're heavily involved in at Google and a lot of other browser vendors is something called Web Platform Docs. Some of you that have been at the SF HTML5 meetups have heard me going on and on about it. I won't bore you too much with it. But it's a great effort where all of the browser vendors are coming together to create sort of the canonical reference for web documentation. Down the line, there's some training plans for that. That's not there yet. Places like Udacity are building up this curriculum. So that's great. I think to take a step back, I think clearly with any sort of HTML5 games, JavaScript is a really important part, so get started with that. We have that Unit 0 in here, but there's a lot of other resources. Another thing I would mention is really get to know the developer tools. We talked about it in the first question. Chrome developer tools, other developer tools, they're all great tools for really zooming in on what's happening under the covers. We're actually going to come out with an interesting developer tools training course, not on Udacity, but pretty soon, so stay tuned for more details on it. Any other suggestions?
I would say just more about figure out the tools that you are going to use. Whether it's web development, game development, whatever, find a set of tools that you feel really comfortable with, even if it's something obscure like Emacs. Emacs. And figure out a workflow. Whatever works for you, just make that as efficient as possible because your tools are really what makes you as a developer, I feel like.
As far as game developers are concerned, I'm a big fan of fake it until you make it. I think that's probably one of the most important things you can have as a game developer is, and I've given this advice to my students for years, is you want to make a game? Fantastic. Go tell me how that guy made that game. Right? It's that mental exercise. How did that person make that product? Go duplicate that. And believe it or not, running through that mental exercise will make you a better developer than half of the people you're sitting next to tomorrow at work. Because you're going through the process, you're saying, wait a minute, how did they get that pathing? When I click here versus I click there, how did they get this flock of demons to go assault the gate of Antioch, right? Like, how does all this work? How does all this fit together? I'm a big fan of just trying to fake it until you make it. And then go look at source code. Source code, source code, source code. You know?
By the way, just real quick, if you guys have more questions, feel free to keep coming up. Until then, we're just going to keep going through the Google moderator questions.
If you can't get out or you're stuck, then just
yeah,
ask it,
then just
right?
Start yelling.
So let's take one more before this one. Would Google App Engine make a good backend for a game like the ones we'll be learning to create?
Yes. So yes, with a caveat. So you have to understand what kind of game you're trying to make. So for HTML5, right, you have sort of a different setup. You've got some server that's going to be serving the content, like it's a web server, right, Apache server, anything. Like that's just going to be serving the content. We call that the client-side data, even though it's being served from a server, whatever. Then you have to look at what your server is actually doing. So how many people play Words with Friends, Chess with Friends, turn-based games, chess over email? Wow, you guys really don't play a lot of games.
Wow.
Awesome.
Okay.
Different strategy here. Farmville. See, that was a test to see how many would admit to playing Farmville.
Admit to it, yeah.
So basically, I break down video games that are networked into two classifications. The first classification is turn-based games, right? So these are games that'll do some action, push the state up to a server. Typically, they'll be pushed into an SQL database or some other data store, MongoDB or anything. And then another client somewhere will ping it and receive that data. Twitter kind of works this way, if you think about it, right? Someone tweets, oh my God, these burgers are so amazing. Ba-dink, gets pushed up to a server. Someone else gets a feed, and it hits their disk, right? Words with Friends, Farmville, all these games actually work along that same mechanic. Now, for that type of game, Google App Engine works very well. It supports simple APIs. It has database processing. It actually has file store processing. All that stuff's fantastic. Now, there's a second classification of games. And again, I am not a network programmer. I'm sure there's many shades of gray in here. The other version is real-time or synchronous-based turn play. And what this is like your player versus player games, right? So this is like, I shoot a missile at you, and I'm expecting that you're going to see that missile movement in space at 60 frames a second. Now, Google App Engine and other sort of servers like that don't have technically they do have the processing power, but it's actually not a good fit for it. Instead, you want to use more towards virtualization machines where you can actually run some C++ code on a machine and actually have that doing the live synchronization between all these clients. So in that, you actually get an authoritative server, and then you get this ring of clients that are actually letting the server be the main compute. And because of that, you're very compute heavy on the server. So things like web services like Google App Engine really aren't that well for you. Instead, you want to be looking at things like EC2 or Google Compute Engine, right, where you can actually prop a VM up into a cloud and let it sit there and run some stuff. Follow up here in the middle.
Yeah, there is a third alternative there. There are some platforms or tools going out there that allow you to send really quick messages peer-to-peer. Okay, so you can keep the efficiency of the client, and basically it's just the messages that now instruct the client what to do. And as long as you have all your assets on the clients, on all of the clients, then it's great.
Absolutely.
And there's some platforms. One of them happens to be called Real Time.
Fantastic.
Okay, and you could look it up.
And that's a really good point. So back in the early 90s, every game was peer-to-peer because we really didn't have the compute resources as the internet community and the gaming community to actually put these dedicated machines in a lot of places. So everything was peer-to-peer. Then people started hacking Counterlife. Anyone remember the headshot hack? Wow. Okay.
Counter-Strike, you mean?
Counter-Strike, yeah.
Yeah.
What did I say?
Counterlife.
Counterlife?
You said Counterlife.
It was based on the Half-Life engine, my bad. So the headshot hack effectively modified the client-side resources of your game, turned all the textures white except for the heads of the other players. Those were bright red. And then they would actually run a screen-by-screen algorithm that would determine any red pixels, aim at it, and shoot. So you were guaranteed to get a headshot every single time. When this started happening, game developers realized maybe we shouldn't have everything on the client. So then they started migrating to the concept of the authoritative server, which is that you kind of have these dumb terminals that are doing some sort of predictive analysis, but generally have most of the computation somewhere else. MMOs work this way, right? When you move and you see your other bud who's got a bad lag will like stop between here while he's doing his chicken dance or whatever, and it's not part of the dance. That's actually because the clients are doing predictive analysis analysis, but the server is then correcting the actual position. Now, there is a couple genres of games to date that still abide by their player-to-player roots, and that's RTS games and networked fighting games. And the reason for this is exactly what he pointed out, which was that it's actually too much computational capacity to have it pushed to the server, right? If you're in an RTS game and you've got 200 units and I've got 200 units and you've got 200 units, we have to somehow synchronize that at 60 frames a second. And pushing all that state to the server might not actually work. So again, it kind of comes down to the game you're making. So to the question, does App Engine look good for the type of game we are going to make in this? Not really. App Engine we're going to use, hopefully in Unit 2, to do matchmaking, login, identity, purchase of items, credit transfer, App Engine or Google Analytics, all sorts of fun stuff like that. But the actual computational capacity about where the game is being computed is hopefully going to be run on Google Compute Engine. Yes, sir.
Hi. So I've always realized that game development is a very good development project to get feedback on what you are doing. Like whenever I had to learn a language, like be it C, Python or something, trying with a game has been the best way to learn the language itself. Like you get the feedback you iterate to it, you write a lot of code. So having that background in me, what can I expect from this HTML5 game development course? What are the technologies which I will be like iterating through, learning much, be it JavaScript, HTML5 or something else?
Right. So the question was, just to summarize, for other languages, he had used a lot of, to learn the language, he had used a game as an ideal way to learn it, and how would this course address that? Actually, that's a little bit of a backstory behind this course. When we first started talking about this course, it wasn't a game development course. It was actually, we should do something around HTML5. And one of the best ways to push any platform is try to run games in it. That'll expose all the weaknesses very, very quickly. And it wasn't until, actually, Sean had built an example game, and we ended up talking about it, and it's like, hey, we've got this great game that Colt had built for I/O, which is much more fully fledged. And it's like, why don't we do that? So in fact, very similar to your story, it kind of evolved the same way. And I think you'll find very much the same concepts. Like these concepts, there was I think Tony, you mentioned it, like, I don't necessarily want to build a game, but I want to use the lessons learned. I think that's for a lot of parts very possible. Clearly there's going to be some areas that are pretty much deep down into the game parts, but I hope you'll find this true.
JavaScript and HTML?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And we're not actually using too many libraries. I mean, a few here to do some things that would just take too long to do. But most of it, like, people have asked this question about, like, hey, what libraries are we going to learn and all of that. That's actually, we've kind of kept it kind of to the basics, so you can really see what's happening, and then of course in your own projects you might use them. So
yeah, we've really tried to avoid libraries for the most part. The main part where we chose not to do that was physics. For good reason.
Okay, thank you. Let's see. Got a couple more questions. Okay, so what are the main advantages of making a game in HTML5 over other ways like Flash? Well, clearly, you know, Flash is pretty much on its way out, right? So,
even Adobe is going fairly strongly
Adobe
towards.
is,
I mean, they've pushed HTML5.
One of the main sponsors of the HTML5 user group.
Big round of applause for Adobe.
Right?
That should tell you something. So ubiquity of the web, not having to use a plugin. I mean, the whole point of HTML5 started with that, right? Like, we should have natively the capabilities to do the things that people wanted to do. And that's not limited to just games, but for many other things as well. So that's, I think that would describe it. So.
And I'll make one follow-up for that. So I think one of the interesting things about HTML5, first off, a shout out from Elko, Nevada, my fellow Nevadian.
Oh yeah,
awesome.
Wow.
I was born and raised. I was born and raised in Las Vegas. So mad props.
Represent.
Anyhow, so what are the interesting things about Flash and other sort of development plugins, even native client included, is that it's kind of an isolated compute, right? So basically it's this element on your page and all the code is running inside of this little element. And to get out of that element into the DOM or into the rest of the browser, you kind of have to go to this very limited post message API, which really only send like a chunk of binary data or a string, right? That's one of the differences with HTML5 is that you're executing JavaScript next to the DOM. Yep. You have full access, full control there. You also can go right to the file system from there. You get access to audio. You get access to all these different things right there native in the browser. You don't have to kind of go through this post-message interface to then modify the DOM, right? Because that kind of splits your code bases between the two. Now, I will say that I'm very biased. I love native client. I think it's a fantastic technology, especially with portable native client coming down the road. I say that because I love C++, and I feel that if you're writing high-performance applications, that you should be doing it as close to the metal as possible. Again, personal opinion, not the opinion of any companies or organizations I may be affiliated with. All rights regarded and all those other fun things.
Security.
Yeah, security. Yeah.
Get them out of here.
I really do like those different technologies, and I will say this, and I say this to every single game developer, because I get a lot of developers come to me and say, what language, what technology should I write my game in? Like, give me the answer. And I never answer them. I actually ask them a lot of questions, like, okay, what's your studio history? What kind of games have you made? What products have you made? Do you have an existing code base? Do you have a legacy understanding? Right? I'm not going to tell a C++ developer to go learn HTML5. If you've got a million lines of C++ code, use native client. Chrome has what, 350 million users right now? I mean, depending on what statistic you look at, that's a huge lion's share of market. Right? If you're a web developer, I'm not going to tell you to go use C++. I'm not going to tell you to learn ActionScript either. In very ways, if you're an ActionScript developer, stay an ActionScript developer. Keep rocking it, dude, no matter what you're wearing. So I really do think it comes back to who you are and what you're doing and what benefits you get there. Take a look at your history and just find what matches, because it shouldn't be about the language. It should be about the experience and the data. Quit limiting yourself about what language you're using. I think as programmers, we've all given up on that holy war. And if you haven't yet, please do, for those of us who are bald.
You have a question?
Okay, well, you kind of answered part of my question, because I was going to ask
Twofer.
about, kind of what you would consider best technologies for creating games, especially within HTML5. And as a follow-up question, within the course, will you cover other alternatives to what you're, going through in the course and with grids?
Ooh, all the alternatives. Okay, so.
So first question, to paraphrase it, is, what do you...
Repeat the question.
Oh, repeat. I was
okay. I wasn't
paraphrasing.
So to repeat the question, actually, you lost track. Give it to me again.
Yeah.
Sorry, this guy.
Yeah. Don't blame me.
Best technology, would you consider the technologies being shown in the course kind of the best technologies, especially for HTML5 games?
Got it. Okay. Yes. So here's what I'm going to say is, again, it's not about the language. It's about the experience. So in HTML5, unfortunately today, there's an upper limit. If you want to do more than 300 draws a frame, you're stuck. You really can't do it. If you want control to memory, really can't do it. You want to avoid garbage collection code, really can't do it. Right? You can get to 3D with WebGL, but then you're fighting this battle that JavaScript really isn't a language that's engineered to handle binary data, yet you're trying to use an API that at its core is built upon performance from binary data. You've got these different ideas fighting each other in that realm. Once you hit that level, I think you should definitely start looking at what other technologies are available to you. Because again, it's experience. If you need to do 3,000 draws a frame and actually access OpenGL in a way that's going to manifest itself in a performance manner, native client's fantastic. Right? I mean, we've already seen, 30-something games that shipped on native client last year. There were Xbox 360 ports, right? Like, oh, hey, let's take this console game and actually put it in a web browser, right? Translating back to HTML5 is really daunting. And I know someone's hand will shoot up and go, what about mscripting? I think it's a great idea. I think it's fantastic technology. I think you're still going to hit the upper limits. You still can only do a certain number of draws a frame, certain number of compute a frame. You're still bound by sandbox restriction, by RAF callbacks, and all these other restrictions that make the web what it is. If you want to write high-performance stuff, you hit that layer. That being said, too, if you don't need that, then you're kind of in the Flash and HTML5 world, and that's okay.
And
it's okay.
The second part of the question was, will that be covered? No.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Only so many hours.
Yeah.
Right. So we won't actually cover those. Just like we had with the libraries, we're not actually going to go into much detail, like pulling in libraries to do random things. Pretty much keep it like that. Keep it pretty much to the basics. It's already pretty complex.
Yeah.
But we're definitely happy to give you some pointers to other resources around that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sounds good.
Great. All right. So we have
we doing
a
on
couple minutes.
Yeah.
1 minute?
1 minute to
Oh,
8.
seriously?
Maybe we'll go a couple minutes
We'll
over.
go, yeah.
Is there a unit testing framework you would recommend for this course?
Oh, unit testing frameworks. Okay, so again, what we're using is a combination of Mocha, Chai, and Sign-On, which I think I'm pronouncing right. Mocha is actually a BDD, Behavior-Driven Development Testing Framework, which is really fantastic. I'd really recommend checking out. The only problem, actually, with all of these is that the documentation isn't necessarily fantastic. Mocha actually has better documentation than most. But a lot of these unit testing frameworks are new, or relatively new. And trying to figure out how exactly everything works is a little daunting. So you might have to end up looking through the source a bit, which is some of the problems we're running into, is lack of documentation. Chai is an expect framework, which basically is a framework for writing very readable testing. So expect this variable to equal that, for example. It allows you to write test code that someone who isn't necessarily a developer can probably read fairly easily. So it's very good in that regard. Another thing that you can do is Sign-On, which is a mocking or stubbing library. And mocking is basically when you say, okay, I want to watch this object and I want to create a fake version of it, so that when it's called with certain values, I want it to return this or that. Or I just want to be able to know when it does get called. I want to spy on it and say, okay, these are the arguments that it's gotten called on, so that I know it's performing right. These three frameworks all kind of do somewhat separate things. Getting them to all talk to each other is a little bit difficult, but doable. I would recommend checking all of them out depending on what you need for your project. For this course, I'd say that probably Mocha and Chai is enough, but I would recommend checking all three of them out. They're actually all pretty good frameworks.
So we've got a question over there on deck. Just one moment. I know some of you need to go at 8 o'clock, and we said we would be done at 8. So we'll go over a couple of minutes. Not a problem, but just a couple of quick notes. Again, next Monday, and then every Monday after that will be the next course. Same time. Like I said, we'll start around. So we'll start the live stream and everything at 7. We'll have food and drink before the event, so you can feel free to come in. We'll probably open the doors around 6, and you can come and hang out for a little bit beforehand. So that's for the next course. We're going to set up a moderator, just like this one, sooner than we did this time. So we'll have that live.
It's actually already up.
Right.
Oh.
Yeah, it's already up. So
thank you, Sean.
Hey, someone already asked the question. Cool.
Excellent. All right, so we'll get to those questions next week. So definitely for the live stream, if you're not here to ask the questions, definitely ask them there. And let's see. So we'll take
one more
maybe
question there.
Yep.
Two more questions on the live stream, but first the live one.
After an hour of questions by an educated audience, I'd like to ask you, what question do you think should have been asked that wasn't? And I'd like to ask Colin, because he's so candid. And another way of looking at that is there an Achilles heel here? Is there any area that you would prefer people not ask you about because maybe it hasn't been figured out that much?
Yep. It's a very good question. Okay. So to repeat the question, he was asking, what question do we wish had been asked? And what question do we not want asked?
Well, we definitely want you to ask.
Yeah, I would
all
actually
the questions you want.
say,
There's no, we're not.
Honestly, I can't think of a question I would rather you not ask. Especially if it's embarrassing.
Don't ask us about vendor preference on
Oh,
browsers.
yes.
Don't ask us about adoptions or like when is this spec going to be adopted by browser A, B, and C. That's really none of our business. Don't don't talk to us about, don't ask us, rather. Sorry, don't talk to us. Talk to the hand, the HTML5 shield. We really don't have comments. I'll put it that way. We don't have comments on adoption of features. We don't have comments on the viewpoint on technologies. If you have, like, what is Google/Udacity's view on X, Y, and Z? I got no idea, and I'm the wrong person to ask because I'm bald. That stuff's really kind of not our wheelhouse. If you want to know about games, ask us everything about games. And if I'm happy to tell you I don't know or I'm wrong.
I guess I had perhaps expected a couple more questions on some of the actual unit content that you may have been struggling with. If there is, then of course we have the forums. Definitely do bring those questions. I can't imagine it's all perfect and there's no questions. So. But yeah, so.
Yeah, I would love questions in the vein of, I have this idea and I'm not sure how to actually make it or build it. Those are the questions that I would personally really love to hear.
So a couple of quick questions from online. Thanks for that other question. So where's the best place to set up an environment for a game project? At least for this class. I mean, Sean, do you want to?
I'm not sure what you mean by environment, really. It's like where to host the code. I'd say GitHub.
Maybe they think that you're taking the exercises, but you want to split off and start building your own.
Oh, okay.
Right.
Yeah.
What IDE would you recommend?
Okay. So
this is a big.
I would So definitely get some free hosted source control. Code.google.com or GitHub or Bitbucket. I love Bitbucket personally.
They're all fantastic. So.
IDE is pick your poison. Right? For HTML5 development, I use a combination of Sublime Text 2 and Coda, depending on what hardware I'm working on that day. From there, obviously, separate tools. Doesn't matter your operating system. There's generally enough around there as long as you can get Adobe Photoshop and Chrome.
And I would say for a game project that you're hosting, if you already know a bit about server-side stuff and you have that kind of element to your game, then something like App Engine or EC2 or Compute Engine would be a good way to go, depending on if you already have experience with those things.
So one other question, let me just jump forward one. We talked about this already. Yes, there have been some problems. Sean's working on it. Yell at Sean if it's not ready by the end of the week.
And I would say no, there hasn't been a code freeze. There's actually been a lot of work on the back end. In the last week, I'd actually love to do a shout out to two of our engineers in particular, Nicholas and Alvin, who have been working 18-hour days-ish to fix this. We basically re-engineered the entire back-end architecture for how these things work in about a week's time. So stuff is happening.
What is the best book or video intro for JS game physics?
Yes, so if you're interested in, so I'm going to start with the word physics and then work the word JavaScript in there. If you are learning about physics, follow a guy named Aaron Catto, C-A-T-T-O. Google him. He by and far is the largest and most influential physics for game development engineer in the world right now. He's the guy who wrote Box2D. So if you find Aaron Catto, you'll find all these good game developer conference videos, GDC videos on how we put Box2D together. Then you'll find out that there's a Flash version of Box2D, an iOS version, an Android version, and also a JavaScript version. Now, we actually use the JavaScript version of Box2D in Grits, and I think Unit 7 will actually cover how we go 6? Something. A future unit will actually talk about how we integrate with that physics engine and the things you need to know. Now, if you yourself are interested in writing physics instead of using someone else's engine, I highly recommend a book called Physics for Game Developers. It's from the company that puts animals on the book.
O'Reilly.
O'Reilly. It's from O'Reilly. It's got like a leopard cat thing on the front. He's kind of like pounced in a physicsy type pose.
Physicsy.
Physicsy. Is that a word? I don't know.
Probably.
But that's one of the best resources to start off with. That's going to introduce you to everything you need to know about physics and basically introduce you to the fact that we're faking all of it in video games. It's not real physics by any means of the term. We're faking as much as we can to make you think it's real physics. But other than that, if you really don't think that, go back and look at a game called Jurassic Park Trespasser back in the day. That was actually one of the first games to use a full physics engine. It was really cool. Velociraptor would run at you and you could shoot the blocks out of something and a building would fall off on the Velociraptor and it was like, oh my god, this is the future! And it was really cool back then.
All right, so we're going to have to wrap it up. I'm going to get one more question from here.
We keep saying that.
Just one more. Are you going to address the wider concept of game design or continue to focus on game coding? I think there will be a lot of little nuggets in there. We have these sort of that we had sketched out during the development of the course. It's called Story Time with Colt. You'll see some crazy stuff coming up in the next couple of units. So you definitely be on the lookout for those. I wish we had some of the blooper reels
we'll see about that.
left over.
Maybe.
So
I would also say if you're interested in more of the wider concept of game design or anything like that, come here. Ask questions.
Right.
That's,
or on the live stream.
Or on the live stream. Yeah, this is.
Especially if you're in Nevada.
Yeah, especially in Nevada.
All right, so that concludes the presentation. We're going to go through the remainder of the questions. I don't know how many more there are on the live stream, but we'll go through them and we'll answer them offline. So if your specific question hasn't been answered, definitely stay in touch on that one.
Oh, I like
Again,
that one.
next Monday is the same time in a different conference room. And we'll be here for a little bit to hang out. I think there's still some food in the back.
Yeah.
We really enjoyed it and hope you did too.
Yeah.
Thank you all for your time.
Yeah, thank you guys for coming.
33 questions we got.
That's awesome. Yeah. Okay, cool. Can we take these off?
Gentlemen?
Yeah. Thank you. I'd say this worked well.